The story kicks off with the ultimate showdown between two characters in a web novel, battling for the world's fate in a dystopian era. The main character Zhang Xinhuan, the guildmaster of Zhenghua, engages in a face-off with the primary antagonist, also known as the world's public enemy, Xin Kanghu. It seems Kanghu has successfully eliminated all members of the Zhenghua guild except its master. The witnesses of the final battle fear that their hero Xinhuan has been left to confront the villainous menace alone. Xinhuan attempts to reason with Kanghu, explaining that the suffering everyone is enduring is a result of the evil deeds and senseless fighting initiated by him. Despite Xinhuan's preachings, Kanghu remains unmoved. He scoffs, labeling Xinhuan a joke, and questioning if he truly believes he's the messenger of justice. Xinhuan, angered, generates lightning from his palms, ready to attack. He asserts that he fights for everyone, warning Kanghu not to speak of justice. Xinhuan questions Kanghu about his nature, wondering if he isn't evil. The witnesses of the battle find inspiration in Xinhuan's words and start cheering and chanting his name. Xinhuan assures Kanghu that as long as the crowd supports him, he won't be defeated by Kanghu at any cost. Xinhuan swiftly unleashes a lightning attack on Kanghu, who attempts to block its power. The lightning appears to overpower Kanghu, resulting in a minor explosion around him. Once the dust settles, Kanghu is seen on his knees, defeated. The bystanders erupt in wild and joyous cheers, relieved that the menace Kanghu has finally been brought down by their hero Xinhuan. They cheer for the hero even more enthusiastically than before, expressing their unwavering belief in him. The crowd starts rallying for Xinhuan to finish off Kanghu and put an end to him once and for all. Xinhuan approaches Kanghu with a sneer, informing him that nobody wishes for him to survive. He then creates another energy ball in his hand and blasts Kanghu with it, sending him several meters away, appearing to have killed him. The bystanders become so emotional that they start crying tears of joy from hearing Xinhuan speak. However, like a flipped switch, the entire atmosphere shifts from being cheerful and inspirational to dark and eerie. Xinhuan's face abruptly transforms from a hero's cheerful smile to a villainous grin. The entire sky starts turning red, and a dark portal opens up. The Demon Lord's giant hand emerges suddenly, making Xinhuan even more smug. Witnesses are shocked and confused, standing frozen, as they can't figure out what to do but watch. This wasn't how they imagined peace and perfect freedom. As the hand of the Demon Lord approaches to attack, they realize they're in danger and need to leave the area immediately. Pandemonium fueled by paranoia sets in, and they start running as fast as they can in different directions, pushing and even stepping on each other to escape the danger. Xinhuan starts laughing maniacally, proclaiming that the Demon King has finally descended, bringing true peace. Kanghu interrupts, stating that Xinhuan's actions resemble tyranny more than peace. Xinhuan is surprised to discover that Kanghu is alive, thinking that he was dead. He calls Kanghu an insect, urging him to open his eyes and witness the just world he claims to have created. The author realizes that the reader's expectations were likely shattered. It turned out that the protagonist, Zhang Xinhuan, wasn't the hero he pretended to be. Instead, he was the villain and a henchman of the Demon King. Zhang Xinhuan and his comrades, the 13 Stars, were formidable long-standing evildoers, seeking to resurrect the Demon King. The true hero was Kanghu, who is determined to thwart their evil plans. However, the author acknowledges that fiction merely mirrors reality. The motivation behind this novel stems from the author's student life, a period when he witnessed authority capable of concealing school violence and power that could manipulate notions of good and evil. This reality is woven into the fabric of the novel. Sadly, the readers neither knew nor cared about the true motive behind his story. Consequently, they began bombarding him with low ratings and hate comments on his webpage out of anger and disappointment. The author immediately begins to regret concluding it that way. He anticipated some disappointment from his readers, but he didn't expect them to become so angry, even to the extent of leaving death threats in his comment section. Realizing he can't rewrite it at this point, he decides to take a nap. Waking up from sleep, he hears noises and yells. As he slowly opens his eyes, he wonders why it's so noisy. Suddenly, he realizes he's lying on a stone floor, and the last thing he remembered was sleeping in his bed. In his groggy state just after waking up, he witnesses some men beating up a boy, and mentioning something about the eclipse's grace. His attention quickly sharpens, and he becomes fully awake. Observing them beating up the boy brought back memories of how bullies used to target his classmates in school. Now he starts to question if all of this occurring is a dream. Just as he attempts to rise from the ground, the man beating the boy notices him and quickly abandons the boy to confront him, launching a series of punches and mocking how he can't endure even a second. The author starts to question why the punches hurt him even in his dream. A different man attempts to prevent the initial attacker from beating the author to death, informing him the author hasn't fulfilled his quota yet. Eventually, the first man decides to leave, but vows to choose another day to resume the assault on the author. After the man departs, the initially bullied boy calls out to the author, surprisingly addressing him as Kong Hu and inquiring about his well-being. The author is taken aback by being referred to as Kong Hu. Attempting to stand, he falls back to the ground. Immediately, he senses a surge of energy known as mana coursing through him. He recognizes this phenomenon and is certain it's congenital mana hypersensitivity, the ability to absorb mana at will. He finally realizes that this could only mean he has somehow been transported into his web novel and has become the character Shin Kong Hu. He wonders why he had to possess Shin Kong Hu of all people. The author concludes that if the boy is still alive, it means he's been transported to a timeline about 5 years before the ending. He wishes he had possessed Jiang Xinwan instead, as he would have been revered as the world's hero. However, if he doesn't alter the ending, he'll die a pathetic death. The world would be destroyed, leaving only the henchman alive. The good news is he knows a way to escape this world. As anticipated during possession, Shin Kong Hu's past and experiences blended with those of the author, merging them into one. In his initial actions as Kong Hu, upon realizing the transformation, he summoned his character profile. A holographic board visible only to him materialized, providing information on his character details like name, level, class, constellation, and skills. Based on the information displayed, he is a level 10 character of the Assassin class, and he has only 2 level 1 skills, short distance leap and transverse teleportation. Kong Hu becomes frustrated with his weak stamina, and regrets assigning his character profile a weakness like congenital mana hypersensitivity just because he's a villain. The boy from earlier rushes back to Kong Hu, inquiring about his well-being. Kong Hu assures him that he's fine, and the boy wonders if he should request a break from the guards. Kong Hu scoffs and informs the boy that if the guards were the type to allow inmates to rest based on their condition, they wouldn't have been brought there in the first place. Presently, Kong Hu is an inmate at a detention center established by the criminal organization known as Eclipse. In this fictional, alternate dimensional world, rookie hunters with mana abilities are captured and compelled to work as slaves to mine mana stones. Kong Hu reassures the boy not to worry about him and to keep mining his stones. However, the boy abruptly questions Kong Hu about the possibility of escape. Kong Hu, more stern and intentional this time, firmly instructs him to abandon such thoughts, and to return to work promptly to avoid another beating from the guards. He emphasizes the importance of not doing anything reckless. The boy nervously smiles and agrees, saying okay. As the boy leaves, Kong Hu reflects that he has done what he could by cautioning him. The boy is a character he crafted as a motif for his classmate, who often faced issues with bullies. Kong Hu acknowledges that advising the boy is the most he can do at the moment, as he cannot make alterations to the novel yet due to the need for his own escape. While Kong Hu was laboring at the detention center mining stones, he suddenly heard a groan and a scream from behind. He spots the guard who had threatened to beat him up, holding an unsheathed sword and yelling at the boy he had warned earlier. It appears that the boy didn't heed Kong Hu's advice to stay put and tried to escape when the guards were occupied with the newcomers. The ruthless guard instructs the boy to pay close attention, as he intends to use him as an example for others planning to escape. The guard then fatally stabs the boy with his sword, causing despair among those watching at the detention center. Despite the heartbreaking scene, Kong Hu struggles to keep from succumbing to anger, as he recalls advising the boy against such reckless actions. The guard then shifts his attention to Kong Hu, attempting to provoke a reaction by questioning why he isn't causing trouble like before. The guard also mentions that with no one to intervene this time, he wouldn't hesitate to kill Kong Hu. In response, Kong Hu coldly states he couldn't care less about the boy's fate. The guard attempts to react, but before he can, Kong Hu asks for permission to use the toilet. The guard is taken aback by the unexpected request, but chuckles arrogantly, assuming Kong Hu wants to go because he's frightened after witnessing his friend's death. Eventually, the guard agrees, and instructs Kong Hu to follow him. Upon reaching the toilet, the guard informs Kong Hu that he only has 1 minute. If he exceeds this time, the toilet will become his grave. Upon opening the door, Kong Hu notices lifeless bodies inside, but remains unfazed, striding slowly in. Meanwhile, the guard outside starts counting down from 60 seconds. Kong Hu starts searching for something he knew was in the toilet, Spotting what he was looking for, he begins to draw a sigil on the ground with his blood. The sigil immediately glows after Kong-Hu finishes. Addressing the entity in the sigil, Kong-Hu claims he knew it was watching him, and understands its affinity for tragedies, trials, and depressions, stating that it goes crazy for them. The guard outside has already counted down to 10 seconds and starts warning Kong-Hu from outside that he only has 10 seconds left, and as such should stop and come outside. On the other hand, Kong-Hu is speaking with the entity, asking why it isn't curious about how a low-level person like him was able to summon it. Kong-Hu is aware that if he waits a little bit longer before summoning the entity as described in the novel, it will appear later on. However, if he delays another day, the hope the world seeks will slip further away. Kong-Hu informs the entity that he is the most effective user of its ability. This entity, known as Dimension Looter, is the main constellation that made a contract with Shin Kong-Hu in the novel. The constellation finally speaks, rebuking Kong-Hu for his insolence in summoning it. However, it informs him that since he captured its attention, it will allow him to borrow its power for a moment. It then instructs Kong-Hu to prove that he is worthy of its immense power. Kong-Hu smirks and confidently instructs everyone to sit back and watch. When the constellation grants Kong-Hu its powers, his stats increase significantly. A notification appears on his status board, indicating he has acquired Dimension Looter, a neutral constellation with specific skills in looting and enhanced user proficiency. All of Kong-Hu's available skills instantly level up to their maximum. After counting down to 0, the guard angrily kicks open the toilet door, hurling curses at Kong-Hu. Upon entering, he realizes the toilet is filled with fog, making it hard to see him. Spotting a silhouette in the fog before the guard can react, Kong-Hu swiftly employs his short-distance leap skill, and launches himself at the guard with incredible speed. Approaching the guard, he suddenly vanishes, employing the transverse teleportation skill and reappearing behind the guard. With a sharp rod, he pierces the guard's neck, causing him to immediately fall and die. Kong-Hu sarcastically thanks the guard for aiding him in deciding to leave the detention center that day, and confirming that the contract is complete. Kong-Hu picks up the guard's sword, declaring that he's avenged his friend's death. Upon receiving a notification that he has now registered the weapon as his own, he announces that he won't be looking back from now on. Kong-Hu steals the guard's uniform and wears it as a disguise. He grabs a gasoline can, spills gas on the floor, and then uses a lighter found on the dead guard's uniform to start a fire. His intention is to use the act of arson as a distraction to escape without raising suspicion. Blending in as a guard, panic ensues as the fire spreads throughout Building 18. The guards start running in chaos to locate the source of the fire. Kong-Hu seizes the chance to enter a closed-type military jeep. In the front seats, the driver and passenger, 2 guards with 3 skull insignias indicating they were 3rd-grade guards, were seated. Kong-Hu wore a uniform belonging to a 2nd-grade guard, a rank higher than theirs, and innocently questions if he was swapped with the rank 2 warden responsible for them. Kong-Hu attempts to play along, stating that an inmate escaped from Building 18, running through the fence on the northwest side. He adds that he's going there to block their escape route, and then asks the driver why he hasn't left yet. The driver apologizes and promptly starts the engine. Kong-Hu is aware from the novel that the path leading northwest from the fence is named Chungmyeong Mountain. Although it initially appears as a promising escape route due to its dark and intricate appearance with few guard facilities, it is in fact filled with traps set by the Eclipse, making it the most perilous route. Kong-Hu resolves to utilize the information known only to the wardens and make his escape. Kong-Hu stays as calm as possible, and then attempts to distract the drivers from any suspicions by engaging in conversation. He tells them he's trying to apprehend an escapee on the run, emphasizing that even if they lose the escapee, the fugitive will surely head to the Chungmyeong Mountain. Therefore, their task is simply to ensure they bring back the escapee's body. The driver informs Kong-Hu that he has understood the situation. Upon approaching the gate, the driver signals the guard standing there to let them pass. Shortly after, they're finally out on the other side of the fence. After a while, the driver initiates a conversation with Kong-Hu again, mentioning that he must be tired due to the ongoing situation in Building 18. Kong-Hu agrees, expressing that dealing with the inmates is challenging as they refuse to cooperate. The driver concurs, noting that the inmates are only hunters in name and essentially are losers. The guard in the passenger seat starts to suspect Kong-Hu for some reason, and spontaneously decides to pose a trick question. He asks Kong-Hu how long he's been on duty in Building 18, and Kong-Hu informs him that he arrived 2 days ago. The guard then suggests that Kong-Hu must have been working in Unit 9, and Kong-Hu confirms that the guard is correct. Kong-hoo's response confirms the guard's suspicion. The guard then questions Kong-hoo about the existence of Section 9, implying it wasn't formed 2 days earlier. Smirking, Kong-hoo admits the non-existence of Section 9, but asserts it was created solely to eliminate individuals like them. Without hesitation, he unsheathes his sword and swiftly beheads the guard, shocking the driver. The sudden loss of control results in the car crashing into a dirt wall along the mountain road, ejecting the dead guard from the passenger seat through the windscreen. If Kong-hoo hadn't held onto the handle, he would have been ejected through the windscreen as well. The driver quickly conjures mana on his palms and attempts to blast Kong-hoo away, but Kong-hoo skillfully dodges it. The driver furiously attacks Kong-hoo once more, successfully blasting him out of the car this time. Through the side mirror, the driver observes that Kong-hoo is still alive, attempting to rise from the ground. Before he can make a move, Kong-hoo abruptly disappears from his spot. In a split second, he reappears, bursting through the back of the vehicle with incredible speed, ultimately slashing the guard's neck. After the guard succumbs to his wounds, Kong-hoo tosses him out of the vehicle. At that moment, Kong-hoo experiences an intense migraine, wondering if he has used too much mana. Unfortunately for Kong-hoo, a patrol vehicle suddenly approaches from behind, prompting him to jump out of the vehicle and slide down a mountain slope. Upon reaching the bottom, he hears a voice congratulating him for eliminating 3 guards and escaping. The person behind the voice comes closer, and as Kong-hoo sees the red glowing mark above the man's head, he realizes the man is a hunter contracted with a constellation. Wondering about the man's power, Kong-hoo suddenly sees the hunter's status above his head, revealing that the constellation is the Skillful Connector, a neutral constellation with the ability to track mana. Kong-hoo then realizes that the hunter's ability to track mana is how he found his location so quickly. Instead of being scared, Kong-hoo gets excited, because he can see the constellation that the hunter's in a contract with and the red mark above his head, and he understands the reason for it. He suddenly remembers that another ability of the Dimensional Looter is for its users to be able to loot another user's contracted constellation by killing them. Kong-hoo then receives a system notification stating he will be able to loot the hunter if he kills him. Kong-hoo becomes even more excited upon realizing he is about to use constellation loot for the first time. Shin Kong-hoo gets a notification bar stating he will be able to loot his target. It's great news for him, as this is his chance to use his constellation loot for the first time. There is, however, the issue that if his target has made a contract with a constellation, then said target should be at least level 100. This means he needs to avoid a head-to-head fight. With a cunning grin, Shin Kong-hoo plots his next move, opting to employ a clever ruse to lure his opponent into a false sense of security. He dashes away with lightning speed, feigning retreat, and leaving the opponent convinced of an easy victory. Meanwhile, Shin Kong-hoo stealthily maneuvers through the dense forest, utilizing his surroundings to conceal his presence. The opponent, relying on his enhanced night vision, scours the shadows, unaware of the impending trap waiting for him. As the opponent's heightened senses detect subtle movements and heat signatures amidst the darkness, he focuses intently on a nearby tree, suspecting Shin Kong-hoo's presence. With precision honed through years of training, the opponent locks onto a faint heat wave emanating from behind the foliage, confirming his suspicion and revealing Shin Kong-hoo's hiding spot. With a triumphant smirk, he prepares to launch his counterattack, confident in his ability to outmaneuver his elusive prey. With lightning speed, the opponent darts towards the tree, anticipating Shin, only to find himself alone in the clearing. Swift as a striking viper, Shin outmaneuvered his adversary, leaving the opponent bewildered and vulnerable. In the blink of an eye, crimson flashes fill the air, as Shin Kong-hoo's blade finds its mark, piercing the opponent's neck with lethal precision. With a wry smile, Shin Kong-hoo recounts how his opponent's arrogance led to his downfall, foolishly discarding his weapon in a futile attempt to outwit him. With a swift and decisive stroke, Shin Kong-hoo delivers the coup de grace, slicing across the opponent's neck in a flawless execution. As the life drains from his fallen foe, the notification bar gleefully announces Shin Kong-hoo's victory, signaling the successful acquisition of the target's contract with the Skillful Connector. Skillful Connector is under the control of Dimension Looter, and is unable to escape outside of extinction or termination of the contract. All of the remarkable Connector's extraordinary abilities have now seamlessly melded with Shin Kong-hoo's own repertoire. With a quick click on the arrow icon nestled within the notification bar, his traverse teleportation has reached its zenith. His keen mana tracking ability has sharpened to perfection, and his night vision now pierces through darkness with unparalleled clarity. With his newly acquired night vision, he scans his surroundings to make sure the coast is clear. His congenital mana hypersensitivity kicks in and he starts to bleed, falling to his knees as the weakness overwhelms him. In a strategic maneuver to conceal his presence from his adversary, he meticulously dampened his heightened sensitivity to mana, adeptly cloaking himself from detection. With a bated breath, he concealed himself from view, and channeled the entirety of his mana into a nearby stone. This critical action prevented a potentially catastrophic surge of mana absorption that would have reverberated throughout the vicinity with explosive force. Such was the delicate balance he had to maintain to evade detection and evade the imminent danger posed by his foe. This ingenious strategy served as the ideal bait to ensnare his unsuspecting opponent, securing the decisive advantage. Employing his short-distance leap technique, Shin Kang-Hu deftly closed the distance between himself and his quarry, positioning himself strategically for the kill. However, it was this very acrobatic maneuver that left his body in its current state. If he pushes himself any further, he risks dying. What he needs to do is get to a safer place. From below the cliff, he hears and sees the truck that transports the sand that purifies the mana stones. He takes a leap off the cliff and lands squarely in the open space of the truck. He has killed 3 guards in the process of escaping, which wasn't part of the original plot of the novel he was writing before he was transported. He has to be more conscientious of this, making sure he doesn't alter any more of the present that could affect the future in his quest to become stronger. In his current realm, Shin Kang-Hu perceives himself as a mere cog in the grand machinery, harboring doubts about his capacity to enact substantial change. Nevertheless, he entertains schemes to capitalize on his existing knowledge for personal gain. As the truck trundles along its path, he absorbs the picturesque surroundings, begrudgingly acknowledging their beauty, albeit with a tinge of annoyance. Meanwhile, back at the towering fence enclosing the compound, the formidable boss dismisses the daring escape of the inmates as a trifling matter. After all, they can always procure fresh bodies to toil away in the treacherous mines, extracting precious mana stones. Yet deep down, a begrudging respect simmers within the boss's shrewd mind. It takes a sharp-witted individual to outmaneuver the vigilant guards, and brazenly slip through the fortress's formidable front gates, evading capture. Despite his precarious condition, the resourceful Shin Kang-Hu, teetering on the brink of exhaustion, summons the last remnants of his strength to reach a nearby payphone. He refuses to succumb to defeat, clinging to the hope that help will soon be on its way. As the boss contemplates the baffling scenario of a level 10 assassin class whose whereabouts remain elusive, managing to eliminate adversaries with significantly higher levels and without the aid of a constellation, Shin Kang-Hu engages in a hasty conversation over the phone. Positioned near Daejeon Station, he urgently requests assistance, hinting at the gravity of the situation at hand. Meanwhile, back at the Fence District, the enigmatic figure assigned to Shin Kang-Hu's case concludes his perusal of the file, a glint of excitement dancing in his eyes. Sensing the thrill of a challenge, he eagerly anticipates the impending pursuit, relishing the prospect of a thrilling hunt. The individual Shin Kang-Hu reached out to is none other than Han Seo-yeon, who promptly assumes the role of caretaker for Shin Kang-Hu. Despite the unexpected nature of the call, she graciously tends to his wounds, marveling at the sudden turn of events that led him to her doorstep. Perplexed by Shin Kang-Hu's condition, Han Seo-yeon can't help but inquire about the circumstances that brought him to such a dire state, seeking clarification on whether he had stumbled into a war zone or faced some other harrowing ordeal. As Shin Kang-Hu begins recounting his harrowing tale of abduction by the notorious Eclipse organization, knowing all too well their reputation for snatching hunters and thrusting them into the treacherous depths of mana stone mines. Understanding the dire circumstances faced by low-level hunters like Shin Kang-Hu, who are often targeted by both nefarious organizations and rival hunters alike, Han Seo-yeon is taken aback by the gravity of the situation. Yet, despite the inherent dangers, Shin's unwavering trust in her prompts a surge of gratitude within her heart, for being someone he could turn to in his time of need. Han Seo-yeon's tears of regret flow freely, as she reflects on her past with Shin Kang-Hu, realizing the depth of her love for him, and the pain of their separation. She laments how she failed to maintain contact with him after their breakup, a decision that now weighs heavily on her heart, as she contemplates the suffering he endured alone. As a seasoned veteran hunter, now contracted with a powerful constellation at level 150, Han Seo-yeon understands all too well the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the hunter world. Had they still been together during Shin Kang-Hu's abduction, She knows she would have been dragged into the maelstrom of chaos alongside him, facing the grim reality of detention in the infamous Chungmyeong facility, fueling her determination to stand by his side and offer him the support and protection he needs now more than ever. As Shin Kang-hoo feels the warmth of Han's care enveloping him, a wave of apprehension washes over him, prompting him to instinctively pull away. With Eclipse potentially on their trail, Shin fears that any display of affection towards Han could inadvertently lead danger to her doorstep. However, Han is quick to reassure Shin that things have changed since their last encounter. As a seasoned hunter at level 150, she exudes confidence and strength that far surpasses her previous status as a mere newbie. With her newfound power and expertise, Han believes she is more than capable of handling any threat that may come their way, emphasizing that her strength should be used to shield herself from harm rather than worrying about him, as she prepares a makeshift escape kit for Shin Kang-hoo. With clothes, cash, and a discreetly formatted smartphone tucked away, she demonstrates her knack for staying one step ahead of the game. Shin Kang-hoo can't help but marvel at her ingenuity, though he can't shake the nagging feeling that Han's guild might be dabbling in some morally ambiguous territories. Despite her valiant efforts, Han can't help but feel a twinge of apprehension, as she tentatively broaches the subject of Shin Kang-hoo rejoining the guild. Memories of their shared past flood back, hinting at a time when they fought side by side as members of the same team. However, Shin Kang-hoo's curt response serves as a stark reminder that their present circumstances are far from ideal, urging Han to let go of nostalgic notions and focus on the here and now. Amidst the tearful farewell, Han Seo-yeon summons her inner courage to assure Shin Kang-hoo that his request has been diligently attended to. With a trusted friend in a position of leadership, she has orchestrated the necessary support for Shin Kang-hoo's next steps. As they part ways, their shared history lingers in the air, mingling with unspoken emotions and silent promises of a future reunion. Settling into the taxi, Shin Kang-hoo directs the driver towards Daejeon Station. With a nod of agreement, he grants the driver permission to switch on the radio. The news bulletin crackles to life, detailing the shocking demise of the entire White Rose mercenary corps at the hands of the Zhonghua Guild. Caught off guard by this sudden revelation, Shin Kang-hoo's mind races with the implications of such a significant event. The White Rose Corps are based in Gyeongsan, Gangwon-do as a rapidly rising criminal organization. On that fateful day, a couple cruises through the bustling streets of the city, expecting a lively weekend vibe. However, the eerie emptiness of the roads strikes the driver as unsettling. Turning to his partner for reassurance, he's met with a grotesque sight, a ghastly display of exposed skull and peeling flesh. Shock courses through him as he struggles to comprehend the horror unfolding before his eyes. Before he can process the nightmarish scene, a spectral figure cloaked in darkness and wielding a menacing scythe delivers a swift and fatal blow, ending his life with chilling efficiency. Meanwhile, perched ominously atop a building in Gangnam, Seoul, a gathering of hooded Grim Reapers awaits, their sinister presence casting a shadow over the unsuspecting city below. As the strange spectacle of a purple sky enveloping the horizon unfolds, a brave news reporter ventures to the outskirts to capture the unfolding phenomenon. Positioned at a safe distance, she attempts to shed light on the eerie occurrence, attributing it to the region's notorious reputation for harboring all manner of monstrous entities. Before she can delve deeper into her report, the scene takes a horrifying turn, as she is suddenly set upon by the very creatures she was there to investigate. In a harrowing display of chaos and violence, the monsters launch a relentless assault, cutting short her broadcast in a brutal and tragic manner. Amidst the turmoil, the skies painted in ominous hues loom overhead, casting an otherworldly glow upon the unfolding chaos below. In the midst of this surreal landscape, individuals known as hunters emerge, wielding extraordinary powers acquired through unknown means, their presence adding an additional layer of intrigue to the unfolding events. As the peculiar events progress, the citizens of the affected regions are gripped by a sense of impending divine retribution. Amidst the chaos, hunters, once revered as protectors against monstrous threats, now turn their sights on their fellow humans, wielding their powers in the name of the gods they claim to serve. Just when it seems that all hope is lost and darkness threatens to consume the land, a beacon of light emerges in the form of a courageous individual known as Jang Shin-wan. With unwavering determination and boundless compassion, he establishes the Zhonghua Guild, a bastion of safety and sanctuary nestled within the heart of Seoul. Word of this newfound sanctuary spreads like wildfire, drawing desperate souls from far and wide who seek refuge within its protective walls. The White Rose Corps have been long tracked down by hunter Jiang Xinhuan for plotting a terror attack at Exit 11 of Gangnam Station in Seoul. But the White Rose Corps isn't a terrorist group as everyone has been led to believe. The attacks on the day people tagged Judgment Day wasn't their doing. If only the people could open their eyes. But they are too neck-deep in their praises for Jiang Xinhuan to see he's actually the one orchestrating the attacks. The driver talks about how his son awakened not too long ago and his dream is to join Jiang Xinhuan's guild. Caught in a precarious position between truth and deception, Shin Kang-hoo grapples with the daunting task of exposing Jiang Xinhuan's sinister machinations without inciting further chaos and disbelief among the populace. He understands all too well that unveiling Jiang Xinhuan's true nature would likely lead to a swift and vehement backlash from those who revere him as a hero. As the day of reckoning looms on the horizon, Shin Kang-hoo finds himself confronted with a pivotal decision: to confront Jiang Xinhuan in a public showdown risking the wrath of a misled and misguided crowd, or to devise a cunning strategy that will allow him to maneuver within the shadows, beyond the prying eyes of blind adulation. Seeking refuge in the aid of Han Seo-yeon, Shin Kang-hoo endeavors to forge alliances with the Mercenary Corps. The plan is to be a commissioned worker who only receives jobs from the Mercenary Corps. When he arrives at his destination, someone comes out to greet him, introducing herself as Lee Yi-rin. Shin Kang-hoo decides he'll go with a pseudonym, choosing to be known as Jung Sung-kyu. The acquaintances shake hands, and Lee Yi-rin lets Shin know that she has a great collection job waiting for him. Shin Kang-hoo gives her offer a hard pass. He's hoping to get something with a good reward and would prefer he's given one of their harder jobs. Lee Yi-rin bursts into incredulous laughter, telling Shin Kang-hoo to not get ahead of himself, he's just a level 10. Shin Kang-hoo insists being a mercenary, though, is about having skills regardless of their level. But who is Lee Yi-rin? She's a mage and a buffer who made a contract with a mid-upper level constellation. Her constellation is a neutral-leaning constellation called the Observer of Chaos, a constellation with the ability to distort and block sight. For Shin Kang-hoo, it feels weird meeting a character from a book he created. She was a character created to one day face off against the 13 stars. What Shin Kang-hoo needs to do now is win her trust. Shin Kang-hoo is like a man at a job interview. He tells Lee Yi-rin it's not about the level but the abilities. Shin Kang-hoo asks her if she wasn't once a mercenary herself, and her reply is that reality is different from spirit. Shin Kang-hoo counters that prejudice and truth are different too. The reply makes Lee Yi-rin smile. She is now also open to seeing Shin Kang-hoo's skills. She just has one thing to judge, and that's whether Shin Kang-hoo can avoid her skill. In essence, she wants to see if Shin Kang-hoo can protect himself from her attacks. Being able to dodge means that he will be able to create opportunities to attack. She has the ability to create puppets using fogs that are able to track even in faraway places. It's not an attack skill, so Shin Kang-hoo won't perish even if he gets hit. But if he's unable to dodge, traces will remain, and so the test will end immediately. Shin Kang-hoo is now pumped up, and so is Lee Yi-rin. As always, it's ladies first, so she activates her fog tracker. The fairy-looking creature that emerges from Lee Yi-rin goes for a point-blank target of Shin Kang-hoo, but he doesn't flinch or move out of the way of the possible attack. The fog clears, and next thing she knows, he's running on the sides of a building preparing to jump? He's definitely proficient in using the assassin's basic skill, short distance leap. Excited to know Shin Kang-hoo wasn't just boasting, Lee Yi-rin doubles her effort. Shin Kang-hoo dodges her even bigger and on-target fog tracker. Shin Kang-hoo's finishing touch is his transverse teleportation. That gives him the opportunity to hold her to yield with a sword to her neck. Shin Kang-hoo can't deny she's faster than he expected, but at least it means she wasn't the mercenary commander for nothing. Lee Yi-rin, who is also surprised by the turn of events, asks Shin Kang-hoo if he has undergone training before. His answer is no, but Lee Yi-rin can't shake off that he has skills higher than a level 10. He easily passes her test, and will be commissioned as if he were level 50. It's a done deal. On the new pair's drive to somewhere not mentioned, Lee Yi-rin sees through the rear mirror that Shin Kang-hoo seems quite fixated on the bulletproof glass windows. Lee reveals that she's had a gunman trailing her. It's been a war between her and the people from Eclipse. Lee gives Shin a commission to track a wanted criminal. They arrive at Gyeonggi-do Osan, an open dungeon. Shin Kang-hoo's target is a man named Kim Mak-hyun. The request is to retrieve a 3D rank item, Varteros' shoes. Shin asks if he'll need to bring the target alive. but Lee answers Kim can be gotten rid of, since he's a known criminal that has taken people's lives himself. Shin Kang-hoo is free to execute Kim Mak-hyun on the spot, as it would even be a relief to the Hunter National Security Agency. As Shin Kang-hoo begins to walk through the dark alley, he recalls how Lee told him his target would most likely be hiding in a dark alley, not easy to be spotted, especially since the open dungeon is such a large space. For Shin Kang-hoo, the dungeon is not a bad place to debut in. In the novel, it's the same place Shin Kang-hoo used as a hideout, so he's already quite familiar with it. This is somewhere he's also likely to find a handful of useful middle bosses. He spots some of them, takes out his knife, slices his palm, and lets the blood trickle down. The scary white bunnies draw out their claws, sneer, and launch to attack. Shin Kang-hoo uses traverse teleportation and short-distance leap alternately to defeat the creatures. He's supposed to retrieve the commissioned item and do whatever he likes with whatever else he finds. Lee Yi-rin asked him what he wanted as a reward, and his answer was to receive a dungeon raid license to raid dungeons with many middle and last bosses. In the meantime, there's a middle boss just hovering above him. Some sort of mummified, hooded assassin that Shin is eager to fight. Standing before his next foe, Ventus, he welcomes the challenge, despite Ventus's rank and kill intent. From the appraisal, he could loot Ventus, and he's willing to take that risk. Even though Ventus warns that death is sure, Shin Kang-hoo provokes him by admonishing him to attack instead of yapping about. Soon enough, a fiery yet short exchange occurs as Ventus charges at Kang-hoo, giving no breathing space whatsoever. After several moments of being put in a tough spot, Kang-hoo uses traverse teleportation to analyze his opponent's moves. He discovers that the attack might look like a single attack with all his might, but the real attack comes from another side. Using short distance leap, he closes in and gets a jab in by the side, causing blood to gush out of the wound. Still using the traverse teleportation to evade attacks, he gets out of the way of Ventus's counters. From his observation, he could draw the conclusion that Ventus is only a middle boss in name alone. As for his head-to-head fighting, it's still as crude as any low boss. Without any struggle, he kicks Ventus in the back of the knee, causing him to drop to the ground, and almost immediately, Shin Kang-hoo retrieves a weapon from his inventory and stabs Ventus from the neck down, a critical strike. This is enough to put an end to Ventus's life, as the light seated in his eyes burns out, accompanied by blood from his neck. As Ventus fades away, a notification informs Shin Kang-hoo that he has stolen the skill Illusion from Ventus, his target. Then he notices he's being watched from a faraway building by a group of people. They see as he picks up the rare reward left from finishing off Ventus, Salacium. The eyes of the group, the one with the binoculars, informs them of the Salacium, as he remains shocked that it's not just one but two in Shin Kang-hoo's possession. The leader of the group and the guardian of the Osan Rank 3, Jo Young-jae, has his mind on other issues, as he wonders how Shin Kang-hoo knew to hit Ventus precisely at his weak point. One of his subordinates informs him that he saw Shin Kang-hoo at the market, where he was getting Severo brisket, kobold blood, and some aesthetics for monsters. Judging from his shopping list, she could immediately tell that he was about to hunt monsters in the dungeon, and most likely go farming right after. From their point of view, Shin Kang-hoo seems like a skilled assassin, even though they've never seen him around the dungeon before. This talk made Jo Young-jae shiver a little bit, as he thought that Shin Kang-hoo is not a hunter who should be in a dungeon of this level then. The female subordinate tries to flatter him, saying that Shin Kang-hoo is no match for him. She then suggests that they should bring Shin Kang-hoo there, saying it would be easier for them to let him rush and exert his energy so they can loot him later. The rest of the group agrees with his plan, praising his mastery, and waiting for Shin Kang-hoo to exhaust himself as they follow from behind him. On the other hand, Shin Kang-hoo levels up to level 16, and gets a notification that his next basic skill is level 20. He puts all his points into increasing his stamina, as he doesn't need to devote points to mana if he can manage his congenital mana hypersensitivity. As he ingests the Salacium, he puts all of his points into stamina, causing him to feel slightly relieved. Salacium has a calming, pain-relieving effect, and is an excellent suppressant for mana hypersensitivity. Its rarity makes it hard to come by in a regular dungeon, as it's hard to mass-produce and it only grows naturally. Only one person in the country is equipped with the know-how to cultivate the plant, and that person is at Ground Zero, a place called DMZ in the past, and from Shin Kang-hoo's current location, it's pretty far. To go there, he'll have to ready himself to buy as much as possible, and he'll need a lot of money for this. He also feels relieved by how things have turned out. If his hypersensitivity had gotten the better of him during the fight with Ventus, he would have died in no time. Meanwhile, as Lee Yi-rin drives to her destination, she gets on a call with the Jiang Shiwan, the Zhonghua guildmaster, and complains about the call quality. referring to how it was until a year ago. Zhang Shiwan explains that the guild is going at it with the interference, and there's nothing they can do about it, especially since she's under the influence of the Black Lion or Eclipse. He adds it might even get worse. He could also deduce that she's been having a hard time after getting involved with those guys from Eclipse. Li Yiren assures him that it's okay and she's gotten used to walking around with eyes on the back of her head at all times. He asks Li Yiren if there's any hunter available that she could recommend to him, adding that he's excessively understaffed these days. She replies with uncertainty, as she doubts that she'll be able to refer a hunter to him, especially one to his liking. Li Yiren knows little of his true intentions or his nefarious side, as she sends in statistics of some hunters she believes will be a good fit for the Zhonghua Guild, but for some reason these selections have failed to satisfy the guildmaster. Still convinced that there might be no hunter to his liking, Li Yiren adds that she thinks he'll reject all the hunters from the get-go, defeating the point of giving him any selection. Zhang Shiwan convinces her that he's trying to change his standards and be open to recommendations from her, asking her to send in a player he can nurture from the lower levels properly. Li Yiren has one name that comes to mind: Shin Kang-hu. Though she thought it would be too early to decide, she still wondered why he came to mind. Li Yiren informs the guildmaster that there's a player, but she believes he needs more time, so she doesn't jump to any conclusions. Commending her recommendations over the years, he assures her that her recommendations have never been wrong. He adds it's just unfortunate that they were lost due to unfortunate incidents. Incidents that he would turn out to have a hand in. Li Yiren, feeling a little unsettled, just brushes it off as the past, and guarantees him she'll keep an eye on Shin Kang-hu, and if he gets verified by her, she'll let him know. Next, she switches the subject of the conversation, as she asks him if he's got any useful information for her. Zhang Shiwan informs her that he has just happened to gain some inside information on some crime syndicates, and he plans to send them to her, through a secured mail. She appreciates his findings, and he assures her that he can help her with this kind of information whenever she needs it. He adds that the guild truly needs a lot of talents, and she's an important part of sending in the talents. If she sends someone good, he'll treat her the best he can. As Li Yiren continues her driving, she wonders why Shin Kang-hu would come up in her head. No matter how high her expectations are of him, it would not be sane to send someone who just got his first commission as a mercenary. Meanwhile, Shin Kang-hu faces a new foe, a middle boss named Ibria. The beginning of the fight remained tough and exhausting for both parties, but Ibria, as a true middle boss, has the advantage for now. Multiple strategies he comes up with result in only a scratch on Ibria or a knife stab stuck in the boss's flesh. After calmly assessing his situation, he comes up with a plan to level the fields. Using illusion magic to distract Ibria, he simultaneously uses traverse teleportation to get behind her. He retrieves a sword from his inventory and with it, stabs Ibria in the gut, causing blood to gush out of her. The attack did her in, causing him to level up and loot Ibria's skill, Abduction. Abduction is a skill that enables its wielder to summon a target within a fixed radius in front of them. The skill also works with objects and structures in the user's frontal vision. The skill's proficiency level is maxed out, since he stole it from a middle boss, Ibria. As Shin Kang-hu realizes it can be used on objects like his sword, he believes that if he can use it well, he should be able to cancel motion as well. Shin Kang-hu proceeds to do some slashes and check out how well the extra stamina points have improved his body. The stalkers didn't quit as they watched him with awe, one terrified by how easily he was able to defeat powerful bosses like Ventus and Ibria without breaking a sweat. One of the subordinates commends Shin Kang-hu's guts, as he took on Ibria and won without even a tanker just by himself. They try to figure out what Shin Kang-hu plans to do, be it increasing skill proficiency or any other motive he has for facing monsters of that caliber head-on. Turning to their leader, one of the subordinates asks if it's a good time for them to screw Shin Kang-hu over, due to fear of how strong he fears Shin Kang-hu might turn out to be. He frantically holds on to the order that they attack him after he gets tired, the safer way for them. Shin Kang-hu charges on to his real target, Kim Mak-hyun, the man Li Yiren assigned him to kill and a member of a rival guild after her life. The onlookers watch Shin Kang-hu as he walks into the local construction site the man is in. Meanwhile, the target goes through an approval letter, stating that the Black Lion Guild has given him conditional approval to join the organization. This would include passing on insider information on the Blue Eyes to the mercenary corps that Li Yiren runs. For him, Kim Mak-hyun realizes the letter brings good news, as Li Yiren's been eager to catch him and most likely end his life. He was aiming to get affiliated with the Eclipse to stay protected, but the Black Lion isn't a bad choice either. The affiliation will enable him to at least step into Daejeon for the first time in a while. Shortly after his celebration of a sense of freedom and protection, he senses Shin Kang-hu's arrival, and believes another prey has walked into his den. Thinking that Shin Kang-hoo is just another guy he can rob, he gets ready to do so after taking his life, and so he summons his hounds to go after Shin Kang-hoo and feast on him. The hounds charge at Shin Kang-hoo ferociously, but he stays calm and collected as he was prepared for this. He pulls out meat from his inventory. Not just any meat, but some that's been bathed in something the hounds could not resist. This successfully distracted the hounds, as they chased the meat instead of devouring him. A confused Kim Mak-hyun wonders why the hounds would leave their task to follow ordinary meat. They're not the type to get so excited over normal food. As the hounds ferociously eat the meat, Shin Kang-hoo pulls out a dagger from the same inventory and stabs one in the head, and successively he stabs all 3 hounds in the head, seemingly effortlessly. Watching all this leaves Kim Mak-hyun petrified, as he struggles to understand what Shin Kang-hoo just did. Kang-hoo clears the air as he explains that the hounds have gone crazy to eat the meat for a reason. He went to the market and prepared the meat specifically for their taste buds, explaining why they couldn't resist it. As the hounds fade away into oblivion, he admonished Kim Mak-hyun to take this as a warning, asking him to give up the treasure he stole if he values his life. Hearing Shin Kang-hoo's demands, he immediately deduces that Lee Yi-rin is behind